thank you, Ian, for the kind introduction. As Ian pointed out at the beginning, is that there is a working hypothesis here that access to open, standardized, large body of translational data will spur innovation, and that's what we all hope. And in our case, what we had very similar hypothesis going in a couple of years ago, where we decided to try to bring together within a particular pharma, Johnson & Johnson in this case, a body of translational data and see how we can really leverage of that large data set to spur some innovation. And that's really what became Transport, this platform which we built with in partnership. Certainly not just ourselves, but it was really an interesting and very exciting project to be involved in. We started with a set of use cases, really, to give a focus to the project. And you can read of the use cases, but those are generally translational use cases, and certainly it can be extended to safety use cases as well, and that is in the work. The whole idea was really to bring in together translational data, which means data from preclinical domain and clinical domain. And in a pharmaceutical domain, what we talk about clinical data is mainly randomized clinical trials and the data generated in those randomized clinical trials. Certainly there is, since then, it's much more interest in more naturalistic data and longitudinal observational data, but at that time this was clearly out of the scope. Beyond clinical data, which gets generated in this clinical trial, there's certainly a lot of biomarker type of data, and especially a lot of biomarker type of data gets generated in the preclinical domain, like gene expression profiling or other molecular profiling, be that proteomics or metabolomics, genetics data, PD markers. So that was kind of the data domain, the data origination, where it came from. We started with a very specific set of use cases. It is a very specific set of domains, scientific domains, if you will, which were mainly around immunology. And interestingly enough, asthma was one of the major interests at that time, and that played very well into the EU-BioPret consortium Ian mentioned before. And oncology was another natural domain, certainly, where there is a lot of biomarker activity going on. So that was really setting the stage for deploying a translational informatics infrastructure. Certainly, Ian mentioned that you need a context that is based on a set of standardized dictionaries and ontologies and vocabularies, as well as a large body of scientific text, which can be indexed, which can be certainly different algorithms applied to extract knowledge and store all that knowledge in this data warehouse. From the user interfaces, Ian also mentioned that certainly a good idea to have multiple ways of accessing the data. Searching and browsing is certainly one. Being able to search by typical biomedical concepts like genes or pathways or diseases or drugs or treatments and so on. That's certainly part of the build application, as well as being able to test hypotheses, selecting patient-level data, creating virtual cohorts, and test different clinical or biomarker hypotheses, and eventually also generating new hypotheses. So that's certainly part of the scope, and it was really a part of what the application we've done, which then last year got a Best Practices Award. This is just a schematic of the application. So there is essentially a data warehouse, which has, I just talked about mainly all of these concepts. There is a master data coming in. There are all these domains of data sources which come into the data warehouse. And then there is a level of federation as well, because you don't want to necessarily store everything in a central data warehouse. And then certainly in order to be successful, you have to have appropriate mining tools. And those are open source, mainly open source mining tools, so which then certainly part of a Transmart which we can provide to partners. One example which we wanted to show is the uBioPret example, which we worked with the uBioPret consortium, which is we worked with the consortium knowledge management group led by EK Go. And the pilot study there is really to take our platform and see whether we can implement it in a short time, and we can then store some meaningful data from another pharmaceutical company, which certainly will give us some fidelity in the solution. So the study was sponsored by GSK, which is a longitudinal study in COPD, which was very well matching into the mission of how originally Transmart was built. As I mentioned, we were interested in lung diseases originally. And it has enough complexity. It has a huge amount of clinical attributes. It has samples, blood sample, molecular profile data. And so that was a very successful pilot. In less than a month, in 3 weeks, his group was able to adopt the platform, install the platform, and then load initial data from this particular study. And right now, the uBioPret consortium is working to extend that and get more data from different sources. And this is kind of the first example, really, where outside of J&J, this platform is being used and providing a pre-competitive translational informatics solution to support a very important IMI consortium. We are extending the model, the access model of Transmart. So this application was built we started to build it roughly 3 years ago. So J&J owns the IP, but from the very beginning, we were very open about the idea to be able to share this application with no commercial restrictions. So we build it on open source platforms, I2B2 being one, and GenePattern and a couple of other applications, Lucene. So we extensively relied on open source applications. And the goal was really to have an open platform, which then we'll be able to share. That's what we are working through right now, the legal framework to be able to share it openly with any interested researcher or research groups, be that in academics or for-profit or government sector. And right now, extensive discussions are ongoing in the United States under the leadership of NIH and other organizations. And we had a North American consortium interest group meeting in end of April, where a huge amount of different interested parties came together, and we started a process to make Transmart available openly outside of Johnson & Johnson to any of those organizations or any of the organizations who are interested in that. In parallel, I already mentioned the uBioPret project. So we are working with the IMI to make it available to other IMI projects, as well as to this project, if this will be the winning consortium proposal, with no restrictions on the usage and the application, that this platform is becoming as open as possible. We mentioned that there is already 3 different consortia are in the process of implementing this, and Ian also mentioned that there are a couple of US-based either consortia like the SageBio Networks, CTCAP, or academic centers are implementing Transmart. So the vision here is to really have a worldwide network of interested parties to provide open global data, globally available standardized translational data sets with an open source code base on top of that to enable really innovation in this space. I think that's the end of our presentation.
You've got a big scary diagram as well if you want to show that.
I can show that. For more information, this is the big scary diagram. Just for those who are technically interested. And we can take certainly questions about this diagram, but about anything else, I think that's the question and answer part is coming.